Thank you all for joining us today to discuss purple teaming and validating your detection and response capabilities. My name is Chris Neuwirth, and I'll be hosting today's discussion. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items that I'd like to review. First and foremost, the webinar is being recorded and will be available to you to watch or download later this week via our website, networksgroup.com. Second, this webinar is eligible for one CEU. If you're currently certified through ISC2 or ISACA, you may receive a CEU for your upcoming recertification cycle. Please refer to your organization's member handbook on how to get credit for participating today. And finally, if you look at the bottom right corner of your screen, you should see a Q&A box. You can use that feature to submit questions throughout today's webinar to us. And we'll do our best to answer those questions during the discussion. If for whatever reason we're unable to work those questions into the discussion, we'll have time at the end to cover all the questions you have submitted throughout the webinar, and also any that you have during the Q&A session. And with that, allow me to introduce ourselves here. My name is Chris Neuwirth, and I'm a senior penetration tester and ethical hacker here at Networks Group. If you're just learning about Networks Group for the first time, we are an ethical hacking and managed security services provider with practices in offensive security, defensive security, and compliance. The company was founded in 1997, and we just recently celebrated our 25th anniversary. Joining us today is John Parlee, the Chief Information Security Officer at Park Place Technologies. Welcome, John. Would you mind telling us about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Thank you very much. Nice to be here chatting with you about Purple Team. My name is John Parlee. I'm the CISO for Park Place Technologies. I've been there for the past 2.5 years. Before that, I had various roles and opportunities in information security. Also served in the United States Army and Army Reserve.
Outstanding. We appreciate your time today. We look forward to hearing about your experience with purple teaming. And so to kick us off, can you tell us about Park Place and how you're structured, your blue team, how you currently operate?
Sure. Park Place Technologies, what we do, we're the leader in data center optimization, networking, uptime, and performance. We have a whole portfolio of IT management services, including data center hardware maintenance, infrastructure managed services, professional services, network performance monitoring, hardware sales. Now we talk a little bit about security, right? We look at security, what we do. We've got the 3 different pieces. Number 1, security operations, right? Primary mission, detect and respond. Number 2, we've got a GRC function. So those are things like our certifications, our customer obligations, compliance regulations, and things like that. We've also got security engineering, right? And security engineering is really defending or designing defendable architecture and systems. And so you kind of put all those things together. We've got an ecosystem around security that's really designed to build off all those different functions, but again, support that primary mission of detect and respond.
Certainly sounds like you have your plate full. A lot of moving parts there. Mm-hmm. So you've been with Park Place for a number of years. When you first came to Park Place Technologies, what were you presented with, and what were some of the things that jumped out initially to you, where you looking ahead, thought to yourself, okay, red teaming and purple teaming are things that we're going to benefit from?
Yeah, good question. So, kind of thinking strategically and about the design, things where we wanted to go and what we wanted to do, right? So, number 1, I think a lot about like the people, processes, and technologies that go into that. So thinking about getting to that future state and the exercises that support the things that we're doing for detection, response, designing, building defendable architecture, certainly we're looking to, implement a program, based on the analysis of, recent and applicable threat intelligence, right? So things that matter most to us. What's happening in the world? What kind of attacker techniques are people using, and how do those apply to Park Place Technologies, right? So that was kind of the idea for the security operations team. And it's not my idea by far, right? Like I've certainly stolen, co-opted, and made this idea into something more. But I stand on the shoulders of giants that have come before me and all this mentorship over the years, right? But that was really the idea. And then, on top of that, looking to design these high fidelity alerts, right? Like we don't have a huge team, but we have a functional team, right? We want to think of ourselves as being, like the special forces of our, of security operations within, within our operating space, right? Where, we need to be going after the most applicable threats, the most interesting alerts. We need to be able to resolve them quickly, understand what they are, and take action effectively. So, trying to build out that high fidelity alerts, and then thinking about that down the road, you got to go through a testing phase, refinement, things like that. And that's really where we get a lot of benefit from things like doing Purple Team, things like our full scope exercise, right? So on top of all of that, we've got what we needed to learn as an organization, what we needed the team to be trained on. At the time we'd done a partial tech stack upgrade too. So, you got to have the right tools for the job. So that was also something that we've worked on over the past 2.5 years. So really, building this, again, ecosystem around our people, process, and the technologies that we have, to support those objectives of, defend, respond using, threat intelligence and high fidelity alerts.
So perhaps some folks are sitting back thinking to themselves, how relatable, is my organization to yours? How, are you guys already the special forces, and how can we become the special forces? And I heard you a couple of times mention high fidelity alerts, and the target is, we want to find interesting alerts amongst the noise. And I think that's a challenge shared by, certainly myself when I was in, operating in a blue team. I assume also for many folks listening today. How do you provide, or how do you develop the context around alerts coming in amongst the noise to say that's a high fidelity alert, that's an interesting alert? What's the process to craft context around this information?
That's a great question, right? Because you've got a couple different pieces there. One, the security operations team is kind of day in and day out, facing that challenge, right? They're constantly getting this barrage of alerts. They're constantly working on tuning, but they only see that in the context of their organization, right? And then you can layer on top of that, maybe they see that in the context of business operations or even IT operations, right? So you shine a light on it, you kind of get these couple different viewpoints of it, right? But now we put that in the context of Purple Team, and we add, you in the mix, or someone that does what you do into the mix. We've got a whole new perspective on it, right? We've got your activities that we have, we can record them, we can replay them on DVR, we can see that, that data set over and over and over again, and then we can kind of like, hyper focus our activities on something specific that we know we should be looking for and gain so much more context out of it. One of the great things I think about the Purple Team exercise, I'm not sure that, if you're on a blue team, you may or may not have ever seen, malicious activity, right? A lot of times, we'll get an alert, and level 1 will escalate it to level 2, and they'll be like, well, what do you think? What's going on here? And you'll look at that and you'll be like, no, that's totally benign. That's just, that's day to day, that's this. But then when you actually see what it looks like, it's kind of eye-opening, right? Like to have that context of there's an attacker on a system or in my network or doing this, those signatures really start to stand out, right? So we're really building that muscle memory for the team and giving them exposure to what that looks like too.
So let's break this down, before we get into the the technical aspects of purple teaming. I think a lot of folks perhaps joined us today because there's so much diversity in what is a purple team. What should folks expect out of purple team engagements? I mean, I think I've shared with you maybe during our purple team that if you ask 10 cybersecurity professionals what's a purple team, you'll get 12 results, 12 answers. And so, I'm very curious to hear what you think, what you thought a purple team was, or what you thought you were getting. And then, in your own words, what is a purple team compared to what you ultimately did get?
Yeah, you're asking for the definition of a purple team. I don't know. It's one of those things, right? Like, you're right. Everyone's got a different example of what it is. adversary emulation, scenario emulation, testing your alerts, testing your capabilities. There's definitely a lot of value that you can get out of it. I think that the value that we get is certainly that we get to put your lens on the activities that we're doing, and we get to see it, right? We've got your focus brought to the table, where we can see your mindset, your capabilities. We can see the latest and greatest tools that you have, and then we can go back and start to review all the the actions that you've taken and start to create these brand new alerts and capabilities. So if I kind of summarize what I'm thinking, it's this idea that we're collaborating and learning from each other on the fly, right? And we've got this ability to just say, all right, stop, rewind that 10 minutes, let's play it again, and see what happens and talk through it. So much exposure to your side of information security is given to the team that it really it just helps us level up everybody on the team that's exposed to the exercise.
And as a frame of reference, and to kind of level set everybody, the purple team that John and I participated in was over the course of 5 days, where for 2 or 3 hours in the morning and 2 and 3 hours in the afternoon, we launched countless attacks with surgical precision in cooperation with you. Side by side, we would launch an attack as a red team. You would watch and monitor and run down the activity within your own networks and within your own infrastructure, and then correlate or reconcile what we were actually doing versus what you were actually seeing, and trying to close that delta. And so, so having gone through that experience and recognizing that, much of the value, or certainly a good portion of the value, is to refine your infrastructure and also, sit alongside red teamers so that you can educate your blue teamers. Because as you said, some blue teamers have never seen this. What were the takeaways for your blue team? When they, not from your perspective, from their own perspective, when they finished the blue team, what did you hear or see them do differently now that they've had that hands-on experience?
Yeah, I think definitely everyone feels a lot more comfortable thinking, like looking at something and understanding what it is, right? Like you've given context of what an attacker looks like in our network. As a quick aside, there are some things that you definitely show us where, the tools, technologies that you're using for things like enumeration, discovery, they tend to be better than off-the-shelf tools that sometimes we have, right? So, we walk away with a whole list of to-dos. We've got one, developer wizard on our team that was basically able to look at some of the tools that you're using, take them, put them into like a DevOps pipeline, and then augment some of our attack surface reduction meetings and tools and capabilities by feeding that new telemetry in, right? And so just getting exposure to the tool set is enlightening, right? Because that stuff's changing all the time. We on the blue team, like, we're so focused on our tools, we're not necessarily able to keep up with everything that's going on the red team side, right? That's your job. That's your expertise, right? And so you bring that capability, expertise, and subject matter knowledge to the table for us to get, right? And then, some of the other stuff that we do too, I tend to think of our alerts as, these things where they've got knobs and dials, right? Some are better than others. Some are more high fidelity. Some are more, you see this alert in context with a bunch of other alerts, it's something to look at. A lot of that is just this kind of tribal knowledge that grows, right? So when we're going through this exercise, we're recording all of that information about all of our alerts. Was it effective? Did it fire off? Was it critical? Was it, what level did it fire off at? What activity were we able to see? And then we're kind of tuning the knobs and dials to make sure that those alerts are the ones that immediately get brought to our attention, right? Maybe even some of the alerts that aren't great, we're tuning them down, right? So that we don't get as much noise in the grand scheme of things, of all the activity that we see from you, right? So these are all the lessons learned from the team, in addition to some of the, the laundry list of things that you come in and make recommendations about, right?
So it's interesting. I hear you say, again, I go back to this idea of how do you take data that you're collecting from across your infrastructure, from sensors and systems and logs and whatever else, and how do you take that noise when you have limited amount of time, money, and resources to digest all of that information to where you can layer on the context and just all the other elements so that you have something in front of you that you can almost act on, upon receipt. And it sounds like what you're telling me is Purple Team helped you get there. At one point you're faced with all this information, you're able to sit through a Blue Team engagement and receive those layers, those additional attributes to put the context around those alerts so that okay, this is something we should react to with high priority. This is something that is completely misleading and wrong, and we were getting erroneous alerts, misleading alerts. And so tell me, after having gone through the Purple Team engagement, have you experienced your I think the best way to describe it, are you responding more accurately, more efficiently? Are you more responsive to your alerts now that you've been able to fine tune them?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Right. I mean, so when we go through the Purple Team exercise, it's kind of like, maybe an incident would be like going to the Super Bowl, right? This is like going to our Super Bowl when we go through and do the Purple Team, right? It's kind of like, we are testing everything and every capability that we have, within scope. So our ability to detect, our ability to identify your activities, ability to create a relevant data set around the events that are generated from the telemetry that you're producing, that kind of stuff, right? And so, really, we're taking all of that and applying a metric to it, right? Did it successfully detect this attack? And if so, that's super important, So yeah, I think you nailed it, Chris, right?
So
Like we are measuring ourselves every step of the way.
So the natural question or something it immediately jumped out at me when you talk about the Super Bowl is if, I was here listening to the discussion, I would say, well, I'm not ready for the Super Bowl. I have a team of 4 or 5 people. I got some through some SANS training, some juniors that just got hired. We just implemented some new infrastructure, a new SIM. We haven't fine tuned it. Oh, Purple Teaming must not be for me. It's only for the folks that are on the far right side of the spectrum. So how did you know you were ready for a Purple Team?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd say it's a question of readiness, right? I mean, I think it's a question of what are you going to get out of it? So, when I look at everyone across the team that participated, everybody got a little something different, right? Everyone's at a little bit of a different level where even just exposure, like watching, is just, it's an incredible achievement. You know what I mean? We invite people in from other departments too, our every people we know in IT and things like that, so that they can get exposure and see what's going on. And generally speaking, it's eye-opening for them, what they see during the engagement. When you think about the maturity curve, I think a security engineer comes to this event and maybe you realize that you've got a gap in telemetry that you need to fix, right? I never thought about collecting that log. Oh, that would be helpful for us, right? Let me get that turned on for you guys, or maybe you realize you've got a gap in it's turned on and you're not receiving it, something like that, right? I mean, these are opportunities for you to fix that stuff, for you to identify it, right? You've got a junior level analyst that comes. He's just getting an idea of what it looks like when you run a discovery tool or Bloodhound or whatever it is. But the neurons start firing, you start putting together, hey, I've got this data set, I can search for this activity. Even if I just search on, the IP, the username, whatever, these basic IOCs, I can start looking at this thing and looking at what abnormal looks like in my environment, right? And then on the far end of the maturity spectrum, we've got guys in the team and that are able to immediately look at that behavior and craft a detection on the fly, right? That looks abnormal. Let's create a detection. let's go back, replay it, test it. It works great. Let's get this thing ready to get published into our, into our alerts, right? So, again, I think everyone gets a little something out of it. It's just, as you continue to build, develop, grow, learn, what that is, you look at it as a leader and figure out where everyone's getting the best benefit. We tailored this exercise that we did, right? Last year, we focused on the on-prem Active Directory. This year, we said, hey, let's look at cloud environments and let's transition. Let's look at going from cloud to on-prem, prem to on-cloud, right? We realized where we were and said, hey, to get the most out of this exercise, we're going to custom build this thing together, right?
And that's, I think, one of the values of purple teaming, where we're sitting side by side.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall this distinctly, when we were working together for your purple team, where especially when we get to the cloud, it was, hold on one sec, can we replay that? Can we dive into this? Can we, let's just make a sharp left turn here and dive into, Amazon. And, when you're able to be flexible and to, deliver attacks, in real time based on what you need to find out. I recall distinctly, going through those attacks with you, and you start to find out, well, who owns that system?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know we didn't have that turned on. It's
mm-hmm.
as simple as a flip of a switch. And then you start to scratch the surface a bit, and it's, this whole team, we had this shadow IT infrastructure over here that we had no idea about. And now all of a sudden you can bring them into the fold and get them squared away.
It's true, right? That certainly happens. It's definitely one of the great things about doing exercises, is that you can really uncover some of the stuff that's out there, right? But going back to the earlier point, I think you realize your shortcomings right away, particularly for like that security engineer that's looking at that going, yep, we got some work to do here, right?
Yeah, and I think I keep coming back to that question of folks saying, I have a budget. I have a team that is hungry. They're motivated.
Mm-hmm.
They, have the right mindset. They're ambitious. They want to, stay on the forefront of skills and knowledge, and they're doing everything you can. But we have limited time, limited budget. How do I best allocate that funding to get the greatest ROI, right? Kind of the question that we always are trying to answer and maximize. And certainly we can do red team engagements, we can do blue team training and so forth. And coming back to what you said earlier, where nothing beats firsthand experience.
Mm-hmm.
I recall us talking about recently the realization when something's happening on your network, that moment when you have that alert and it becomes clear, this is real now. And how do you, what's the best way to emulate that experience? How do you get the adrenaline rush? How do you get that?
Right.
And so, share, do you have, what comes to mind there? Do you have any, examples where, folks have had that moment of realization where, okay, this is real life, but we've done this before. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I've had my own revelations where these things have happened, right? Your heart starts racing, you get, your hands get a little sweaty, and you're kind of like, I don't know what to do, right? The playbook that you have, the incident response, you want to take a measured approach and get everyone involved and start your incident response procedures, but it just kind of like, that first time is it's kind of crazy. So that, I think that's the other great thing, right, is that as you get more exposure to this, you certainly get, you tell everyone, stop, hang on a minute, get the playbook, right? What are we going to do? Let's talk it through. There's we can make a decision, right, before we tip our hat to the adversary or reach out to this end user and put the onus on them to tell us what's going on. Like, that's not a great idea, right? So let's just let's talk about what our procedures are, what our SOPs are, focus on those, right, and get moving. I love that you think about it like that, right? I think it was maybe a week or two ago, someone asked me, what's going on in 2023 security trends, right? And immediately my head went to, right, let me get some buzzwords. We got ransomware, probably, right? There's going to be some third-party risks, probably going to be a huge, software issue, and there's going to be a weakness in the software, malicious implants coming from all over the place, right? But then, I'm thinking about this thing and I'm like, well, the threats change, right? They always change. But at the end of the day, you go back to where can you template this, right? An attacker wants to get access to your domain, right? Your systems, your network, your data, that stuff. They're looking for initial access. They're looking to do discovery. They're looking to do, lateral movement, privilege escalation, those kind of things. Those are the things that we can look for, right? Those are the things that the team learns about, gets exposure to, looking at these attacker techniques, trying to get as far left as you can, right? And can build this knowledge and context of what they are, right? That's huge.
And I think we've spoken about this before, when you're, trying to defend your attack surface, there's so many more opportunities for an attacker. There's just so much to choose from as far as tools and techniques and so forth. And it seems, especially from the red team side, that that folks are spending a lot more time trying to catch, an attack at the 10th or 20th step, when ADCS template misconfiguration or some abuse, deep into the network, where all of the low-hanging fruit and some of the easiest ways to catch an attacker are happening at the very beginning, that initial foothold, some of those initial persistence. And I think during the Purple team, with your team, we spent extra time, going through, a number of different tools that attackers use to enumerate and try to gain that initial foothold, especially now with the, kind of the pendulum swinging towards cloud presence. Trying to secure cloud environments is obviously challenging in and of itself, only because folks have limited experience with it still.
Right.
And we saw that firsthand. We have a question from the crowd. How do you craft an ecosystem conducive to security operations from a leadership perspective? And I think this is getting to the heart of leadership in cybersecurity in 2022. How do you build a culture in an organization that is going to benefit and get the greatest ROI from a Purple team engagement?
Yeah, good question. Well, wow, I don't know. It's something that I think we continue to work on every day, right? But I mean, I have a couple thoughts on it. So, number one, what do good leaders do, right? Yeah, I think you got to lead by example, right? So, surround yourself with people that you think, or hopefully they are, right, smarter than you. But you got to be able to kind of walk that fine line between, here's the expectations, here's what it looks like, go forth and build something wonderful or develop something wonderful, right? Make it yours, own it, and give them the flexibility to do that and really drive it. I think that, to me, those are some really, key things in my opinion. And then the other thing I'd say is, we just talked about how things are like super complex in security, right? Like we have all kinds of cloud environments that are out there. They're all different. They're not easy, right? Some of them are easier than others, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? We're talking about things these days like, zero trust architectures and, these rolling scores measuring, your identity, your device's posture, all that stuff, and aggregating up into this ability to conditionally allow access to applications and tools. And, it's really, really complex, So I also think that you've got to provide learning opportunities, right? And that doesn't always necessarily mean like, hey, here's this training course you're going to, here's this conference you're going to. It could be, internal training opportunities, it could be tools, it could be provided by vendors. There's so many different ways to do it, right? But I think you got to have that, those opportunities available and keep building that drive and feeding that urge that, to get this knowledge and information so people are excited by it, right? And if you're excited, you're going to have fun. right? So I think that's the last thing that I would say is you got to make sure your team's having fun, right? Do these exercises, make them out to be the Super Bowl, because that's what they are. We're just, everyone should get a congratulatory, slap on the back afterwards, because we just spent an entire week, all day, every day, and then working after hours too, probably looking at this stuff going, that little thing bothered me. I want to be able to detect it, right? Like we're having fun doing this stuff too. So, no, I don't think it's solved, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that is such an important point, though, that specifically Purple Team is that it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
That sure, yes, we're launching attacks. You're finding vulnerabilities that you either didn't think were there, telemetry was misleading or absent. Obviously there's some agita, that is experienced as the findings come about, but it's a fun learning experience. How often, perhaps never outside of a Purple Team engagement, are you going to see these nuanced, cutting edge attacks in your environment in a controlled way that you can catch it, as a defender, and ensure that your defenses are calibrated to the extent that you can catch this in real life. Again, I just, and to build the confidence with your team. I recall, when I was training a blue team, with our playbooks, a lot of the folks came to the table, some military, some crisis managers, and they said, the playbook's nice, but once something is happening, we're just going to put it on the shelf and handle the incident the way we're going to handle the incident.
No plan survives first contact.
Yeah, and everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, that works for hurricanes and floods and tornadoes and so forth, except in cybersecurity, the playbook is everything. Mm-hmm. And to be able to validate not just your detection capabilities during a Purple Team, but as you said, you had folks creating IOCs on the fly. They were scripting stuff and developing tools on the fly. As a leader, as the CISO, you're able to see the skill set and how they actually perform under as close to real life conditions as possible. And it's just one of those, the ROI is just so impactful. You're having fun, and the folks don't even realize that they're getting this real world hands-on experience in a way that, absent a real event, they never would have had.
Yeah, right. A real event may not be so fun, right? But but gee, this is what we do, right? This is the mission. This is why we do it. Tracking hackers through the network. It's exciting.
And it's that muscle memory, to understand when this happens, okay, this is not something I need to overreact. Mm-hmm. Right. You're not just calibrating your detection, you're calibrating your people's emotions. Oh, I've seen this before. I can, handle it. And it's, again, where else are you going to see that? Folks might experience some malware, somebody clicking a phishing link here and there, but how often are they going to see, command and control infrastructure deployed on, your domain controller?
Yeah. Or, just even realizing the amount of work that goes into that, what we do, right? Like scoping an attack, right? You might be pivoting between different IPs, you might be pivoting between user accounts. You need to find all of that. And if you want to eradicate it, if you want to survive the attack, right, you've got to find all of that and document all of that so that you can go through, do a concerted effort, clean up, and then hopefully there's nothing left over, right? So it's, just to get people exposed to that is pretty significant.
I mean, what I hear you say is it's never ending.
Yeah.
And this is not, first of all, it's not a silver bullet, but also it's not a one and done. Hey, we did it, we're good. It is very fluid.
Right.
And not just because you're constantly, implementing new infrastructure. I mean, folks are buying new things, they're upgrading, they're patching, your environment is very fluid, but we're always coming up, well, I shouldn't say we're developing, but new exploits are being shared publicly all the time that we're then able to throw at your environment and see, can you detect it? And I think we did that a few times. For your particular engagement, you happen to be, a week or two after a number of exploits had just been released that we were able to try in your environment.
Right.
So the big the big next question that comes to mind, at least for me, is, okay, so well, now what? So you guys have done regular red team engagements. So you already had a pretty objective understanding of where your detection capabilities were. You understood kind of where some blind spots were that you could shore up in other ways. You then proceeded through a purple team to both fine tune your environment, train your staff, and so forth. But now what? Where do you go from here?
I don't know. What else is there to do? No, I mean, we're constantly looking for opportunities to improve maturity for everything, right? I think we talked about this the other day. Like, what how do you take the purple team? I mean, I think honestly, I think every year I could come up with purple team exercises that challenge and help the team learn and level up their skills and abilities, right? Certainly, I don't think that is something that is difficult to do. Obviously, we need to plan it out and be on the same page. But I think you mentioned it the other day. At what point do we do something where we operate the red team side of it completely isolated from the blue team side of it, right? Blue team's working, and then at the end of the day, maybe we get back together and try to figure out, what did you see, what did you not see? I think that puts a new light on it too, right? In terms of adding a little bit more mystery around what kind of attacks that you're leveraging, what kind of capabilities you're leveraging in the environment. I don't know. The only downside to that is I really enjoy at this point with the where we are, the ability just to like focus on the things that you're doing and see them too, right? There is so much gain from just watching how you operate. For most of the sessions, you shared your screen with us and showed us every little bit. So, but I don't know. We'll see. I think that might be the future. Obviously, what we do, every year, and Networks has continued to push us and challenge us consistently. Is we do a full scope exercise, right? So we complement Purple Team with full scope, and that really is where the team they have no idea it's coming. They have no idea what they're in for. They have no idea how it's going to be orchestrated, and their job is to detect and respond, right? Treat it like a real incident. So, there's an aspect of what we're talking about here, built into that as well, I think.
So we were, as red teamers, trying to conceptualize a full-scale exercise similar to what you just described, but in a smaller time frame. Over 3 full days or 5 full days. Limited in scope, but exactly that, where it's 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, you get your one piece of information that there's been a compromise, and you have until 3 p.m. on Friday to stop and kick out the hacker from your network. And along the way, the red team is going to plant flags, on this desktop, in this SMB file share. And, over the course of the week, your goal is to both kick them out of the network, but also to understand the pathway and to be able to describe what information did you collect that you were able to correlate with this activity and identify where they were in the network. Because it's much more than just stumbling upon or having one piece of information that says this is where they are. And so it's not so much a full scope where we're looking for all the vulnerabilities and all the exploitations. It's more of a race to the finish line. In a 3-day period, in a 5-day period, can we take control of your network? Can we exfiltrate data aggressively? We're not worried about noise. And your team has to chase the it's whack-a-mole,
right?
Because again, it's that hands-on experience.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Chris, right? Because some of the challenge that we have, when we look at doing these exercises is, just scope in general, right? So, you make the scope too big, then you kind of end up in the situation where, maybe, some some of the team may not be ready for something like that, right? Or then maybe you're saying, okay, you're taking this aspect of this event, you're taking this aspect of it, you're splitting people into different areas. You're really trying to, orchestrate your battle plan for this particular incident, right? I think where you're going with this, given the constraints of time that we have, the ability to really narrow down that scope so that you can actually like fully respond to every aspect of this, right? Which I think is a really great idea. Going back to what we talked about earlier, I think the intent behind incident response should be you fully scope what happened so that when you are ready, you turn the tables on the attacker, you get them out of the network, you get them out of systems. There's no chance that they're getting back in, right? If you miss something, hey, your bad day might turn into a bad week.
So this conversation started when an organization said, how do we know we're ready for a purple team? How do I do a red team first or a purple team first? And so this idea originated where we said, well, it's a diagnostic exercise. Because if I said to you, tell me where your strengths are and weaknesses are with your detection capabilities, I'm going to get your opinion. Now, you might have a much more informed opinion than perhaps others, but again, it is somewhat biased.
Yeah.
You can't change the objective facts of a diagnostic exercise. You either performed or you didn't perform.
Right.
And when you take that information and you apply that to a purple team, you're able to focus specifically on the things that were lacking or entirely absent, in that diagnostic exercise. And so it's again, just to highlight how fluid this is, and how, it should never, purple teams should never just be looked at as just the purple team, right? It's one piece in the puzzle. And it brings me to my next question. Now that you've, you have this purple team engagement fresh in your mind, would you say it is better to invest in hardening systems? If you had limited funds, time, money, and resources, invest in hardening your system or spend it on the detection and response? And so the question verbatim, is it better to invest in hardening systems or in detection and response?
I got it.
Yeah.
That's a tough one.
And we'll assume it's mutually exclusive.
Oof, wow. This is like the Kobayashi Maru. There's no right answer here. You're never gonna get to everything, right? The attack surface. There's so much there. I don't think, I'm not really an optimist when it comes to security. I'm more so hopefully, a realist or, being pragmatic about the issue that something is going to happen. You need to know how to detect and respond. You need to exercise your incident response plan. You need to get the right people involved so that you can scope, come up with a remediation plan, and keep maybe your business operations or whatever it is running, right? So I say if they're mutually exclusive, I think it's probably better to start looking at your detection capabilities, detection and response, right? I don't know. I think we all know too. You can certainly harden, but there are so many weaknesses out there. You look at like Active Directory in an on-prem environment, right? I mean, there's just so much that you need to do to harden an Active Directory instance, right? It's and tons of weaknesses, new weaknesses coming out all the time, new weaknesses that are discovered, not only like domain controllers, but to your point earlier, Active Directory certificate services, things like that. It's just, you've got to be able to understand when there's abnormal stuff going on in your network, regardless of the state that it's in, be able to respond to it.
So my knee-jerk reaction to this is I would always spend it on detection and response, only because even if you're fully hardened and there's nothing exploitable, I still want to know if there's an adversary amongst my infrastructure. There's something bad here. I don't want the bad here. I want to know that it's present, because sooner or later there's going to be an exploit. Right. Something is no longer going to be hardened.
I was going to say the other side of that too, Chris, is, I hate to say like the weakest link thing, right? Like we've always got humans in the loop on everything, right? And with social engineering, with the ability to proxy authentication, proxying tokens, all of that stuff, it's not too far-fetched to think that that kind of attack, could circumvent all of your hardened systems, right? And allow someone to get access as as masquerading as another user.
Exactly. If they can touch the wire, they
Mhm.
can just sit there and just siphon off data as, opportunistically, as it comes about. Again, it doesn't matter how hard, your infrastructure is.
Right.
It's very challenging. So I'd like to, I know we're about 10 minutes off the top of the hour. I'd like to give folks an opportunity to ask some questions. If anybody has stuff they'd like to ask John, to submit them in the Q&A here. And while we wait for folks to tee up some questions, so I know, I asked a loaded question, what next, what now?
Mhm.
And, you had shared prior, we recognize ransomware is going to be, well, ransomware is not going anywhere. We saw in the 2022 Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, ransomware, is still very much an active threat. It's on average costing folks about 4.25, 4.3 million on average, right? This is an issue. How do you combine the two? How do you successfully, whether it be in a purple team or otherwise, how do you successfully practice ransomware
Mhm.
to refine your detection of it?
That's a great question. Well, again, I kind of go back to the idea that if we're at ransomware, we're kind of in the boom, right? Like the dust is settling, right? Like we're now just kind of being like, okay, we got a problem here. So, going back to what you said earlier about how do we refine and generate alerts that get us, back to the left, right? Back earlier in the kill chain where we understand where we've got initial access or discovery activities or privilege escalation, lateral movement, stuff like that, so that we can respond. And I don't know if we came right out and said it, but time matters, right? That's the other thing that I think that we really walk away from the purple team exercise with is this newfound, just respect for time, right? The time it takes for a log to go from a syslog server to SIM to indexed to parsed to event, alert, incident, right? It can take a lot of time, whether it be a SaaS solution providing you logs or endpoint sensors or whatever it is. And an attacker, from what I've seen in your activity, like you're super fast. Time is not a luxury that we have. So when I think about all of that, the things that are at stake here, when we talk about ransomware, I really think about, what's at stake, what's going to happen, right? Because we've already gone through all of our opportunities to detect, prevent, respond, all of that. What's at stake? Well, now we've got, the business is impacted. We've got systems down. We need to go into a response. We're going to have people doing all kinds of stuff. So at that point, I'm really thinking about the incident response plan, right? Or getting the business continuity team involved, right? And testing out what we're going to do. So, I think that when I think about that within the context of the organization, those are really the important things, And honestly, what I'd love to do in the next year or two is maybe put the two together, right? Where we've got the purple team exercise that leads into an engagement with the business continuity team, right? So now we're training on these different aspects. You've got a set of individuals that would probably go and get trained on, purple team, but it's not the right forum for the business continuity team to be in there, right? But the output is going to be something that they can work on, right? So now we're kind of chaining these things together, but we'll probably end up with like a 4-day exercise that everyone's got to be in, right?
So what I hear you say, though, I hear you just created a new idea of an executive purple team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you loop in executives, disaster recovery, business continuity, and overall enterprise resilience, and really, push the organization to connect the dots? Because I think you'd said it several times. Folks certainly understand when you're experiencing, a confirmed attack, you have an adversary actively present and exploiting your organization. Certainly, it's great that you have detection and response capabilities, but that is a microcosm of all the things happening in the organization that need to happen
Right.
to maintain, the bottom line. And so how do you, this is a loaded question, how do you elevate a purple team to draw in the organization, the great, more aspects of the organization so that everybody can benefit from the purple team?
Yeah, I think you just use it to create a lot of fun pretext, right? Fun's maybe the wrong word here. Interesting pretext, right? So you've got this purple team exercise that has an outcome. The outcome is, this scenario that you've generated, but all along the way, your SecOps team, your IT team has been involved, right? And maybe you're feeding some information out to other people in the organization too about the status, knowing that it's an exercise, right? And that just feeds right into, your business continuity team, your crisis management team. Here's the situation. Here's what we've been dealing with for a week. It's escalated to the point where you're involved now, right? So you've got all this cool pretext that you can then kind of force into this organization-wide exercise, right? That really kind of helps you practice the things that you got to practice to be ready in the event that something happens.
And you can certainly just squeeze that in with nothing else going on.
Yeah, right. That's always the challenge, right? Hey, time. It all comes back to time.
So we have a number of questions here. Let's see. So what are the most critical metrics or information that security team members should monitor? So in other words, if my security team members wear multiple hats, how can they best leverage automated controls or tools?
Automation like SOAR platform type stuff?
So what are the most critical metrics or information that security team members should monitor? So during your
start there?
Yeah. What did your folks, because you had said there were some things that took quite a long time. I remember that distinctly.
Right.
It was, depending on what it was, it could be hours before you're properly notified of something happening. So knowing that now, does that change your opinion on what's most critical to monitor?
Yeah, so I guess let's break this down in terms of a couple different things, right? So in terms of the purple team, we are using that event to benchmark all of our detections. So that in and of itself is a metric, right? Like which alerts were fired off during the purple team. Then what we do is we go through, we take a look, and we have them classified as being, we could just use, are they critical, high, medium, low, right? So if we see your activity, then it should be critical. Critical is the stuff, I talked about these, dials and knobs earlier, right? Like the team has the ability to move things up and down, right? If it's super critical, or if we need to set it back to high, whatever it is. And then we classify things and say, these are the wake me up in the middle of the night alerts, right? If this happens, I need to get moving. Or, even better, we should think about, if I see this activity, what kind of automated things can I put in place that prevent it from going any further, right? We're also having those kind of conversations in with the team, right? So, generally those are some of the things that we're looking at. Now, the other thing that we, over the past couple of times we've done purple team exercises or the full scope exercises, time has come up consistently, right? When we feed in an alert through one of our particular platforms, it could be up to an hour before it fires off, right? So now we've got this concept of, does it need to be immediate, or can it be on a longer period of time, searching for that type of activity? And so we're benchmarking that stuff too. So I think all of that is really important to look at from a metric standpoint, right? And really we're using tags, we're tagging stuff as it comes in, trying to build a data set that we can throw in an Excel sheet later on and take a look at it, right? Did all this work? And then we marry that up with the results that we have from afterwards. Networks Group puts together this report, and then we take a look at that and see where where they rated us in terms of what we could see and not see. So then we know we've got some work to do in those areas as well. Now, again, I think in terms of automation, we're really talking about what kind of actions can we take from a prevention standpoint, right? And that's kind of an interesting other aspect too, right? Particularly a lot of things that we see tend to be living off the land or stuff like that, right? So you see PowerShell activity, and maybe you've got a solution out there that prevents that type of activity, but you don't want to necessarily go in and SHA-256 block all PowerShell in your environment, right? So there's some interesting nuances to that question as well.
It's funny. I've come a long way in my opinion on automation. I was very much, let's refine our alerts, let's funnel them in 101 ways and trigger all these things. And two things happen. One, something inadvertent happens and you end up triggering the wrong process, or something doesn't quite fire off like you expected. But especially today, with the ways that we're achieving domain administration on the red team, what we're finding is it doesn't matter if you have any automation for some of those things.
Right.
There are so many ways to get around that why spend time, money, and resources and that false sense of security that, hey, we have limited people, let's use automation to augment our staff, and we feel good about it. I can tell you, from my personal opinion, there's so many ways to circumvent things like that. And in fact, it really just informs me better on my attack path when I see some of those automations happening, in the environment with accounts that are getting burned as we progress the attack. So yeah, once upon a time, perhaps automation was worth the effort. Nowadays, it just seems, with how complex the Active Directory environments are in particular, seems like a bit of a lost cause.
Right. And that, that kind of goes back to the whole idea around like one of the most important things being detection and response, right? Because, the activities that you're generating as part of the red team, they're abnormal. You can pick them out, right? But they're not, you're not using things that you could necessarily just block, right? You're using tools and techniques and stuff like that are built into the environment, built into the infrastructure tools and stuff like that, right? So you've got to be on top of context, normalization, what looks weird in the environment, finding that, investigating it, scoping it, remediating it, right?
So and that's it. I mean, I think it's a SANS phrase that where to identify abnormal, you really have to understand the normal,
right?
And yeah, I mean, and the other point you just made that I think goes grossly unrecognized is that we see organizations spending tons of money and time and effort buying all kinds of solutions, when in fact there is a decent amount of detection and response capabilities built in to many of the even Windows now. And it's one of those things that often in a purple team we go through it and it's, oh, I didn't realize we could log that. I just needed to flip the switch.
Right.
Really simple stuff.
Yeah.
Another question.
I was going to steal a phrase from someone I know, right? Focus on the fundamentals, right? You're gonna, there's all these like high speed solutions out there, but really at the end of the day, it comes back to how do you execute the fundamentals?
That is, yeah, you can't state it enough. So here we have, from a blue team perspective, after your purple team engagement, what were some of the easier fixes that you were able to make that you discovered versus some of the things that were much more daunting?
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything I've talked about today, I think in some way, shape or form, we had to kind of go back and look at, right? We looked at some of the attacks that Chris launched against us and said, oh, focus on the fundamentals. Like we didn't turn on the telemetry on this particular thing to see it. Let's get that turned on ASAP, right? Easy fixes after that. certainly, like I said, we were coming up with detections on the fly, right? So just taking those and turning them into full-fledged high fidelity alerts within our environment, was simple, right? And then, we always, we walked away with probably some pretty easy suggestions in some cases, like, hey, you could do this, you could do that, and then some pretty hard suggestions too, where and Chris, I don't, we talked about it, like, how do you fix this? We're like, I don't know, I'm not sure there is a way to fix it, right? So how do we detect it? So I mean, there was the whole gamut of things that we needed to take a look at, right, when you walk away from something like this. Certainly too, I mentioned, the capability that you see Chris use, you don't even necessarily get that from an off-the-shelf tool, right? So, within a couple of weeks, we had someone on the team go and build out some of these capabilities within our environment that augment our ability to discover things that are out there and what weaknesses they have, and feed them into existing workflows. Just a matter of getting the data, right? So there's plenty out there. It's just a matter of where do you put your focus. And we certainly tried to get some of the low-hanging fruit first, and then definitely look at the most critical things, right? And those ended up being some of the more challenging aspects.
Sure. So we're all just about at the end of our time together. And while folks use this as an opportunity to type in any final questions they have, I'd like to ask you one final question, and that is, what advice would you have for organizations considering conducting a Purple Team engagement?
I'd say you should definitely do it, right? I mean, enter into a conversation with whoever you want to work with. Certainly, Networks Group comes highly recommended. And start working on what the scope is and what you want to test. Like I said earlier, everybody on your team will get something out of it. So whether you're at the far right of the maturity curve and thinking about what your capabilities and testing them and measuring and creating detections and gathering data sets and replaying them and all that stuff, or you just need some exposure to what an attack looks like, right? You'll get both out of it for sure. Certainly with working with Chris, everything was, like he said, very fluid. He's very open to making you, actually he's very open for you to get what you want out of the Purple Team, right? So that is really, really great. My goal for next year is to challenge Chris, right? Challenge Chris during the full scope, challenge Chris during the Purple Team. It should be difficult, right? When he tries step one, he should be like, John, I got nowhere. I need you to create this account and open up the VPN and give me my multi-factor creds, all that stuff, right? So that's certainly the goal, is to make it as difficult as possible.
I'm looking forward to that challenge.
Well, we challenged you this year. Come on.
That is very true. You have an outstanding team. Listen, I greatly appreciate your time today, your insight and guidance on Purple Teaming. I hope folks strongly consider conducting Purple Team engagements. I think they're very valuable. They're only getting more valuable the better we are at refining them. And again, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for everyone for joining us. And this recording will be available on our website shortly. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Chris. It's been fun talking security today.
Likewise.
See ya.
Talk soon. Thanks, John.